and I'm coming to you today from Seattle, Washington, and this is the second part in this series where I'm doing a live reading of my book, The General Theory of the Translation Company, which I wrote with my co-author, of course, Renato Beninato. And I'm live streaming it to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of these right now via my company's channel, Nimsy Insights. So if you're seeing this and you're interested in following along, make sure to subscribe to whatever channel you're watching this on so that you can be notified when we go live again. In this series, we're going through The General Theory of the Translation Company, which is a book that I had written with my partner, Renato Beninato, about 3 years ago. And it's been a long time since I've had a chance to go over it, so I wanted to read through it, and I thought, since I'm doing this anyways, might as well do it together with you guys. At the time of this recording, it is 2020, and we are all stuck at home working remotely. So if you'd like to join me as we go through the general theory of the translation company together, you are my guest. Last time we started off with the very short introduction, the introduction section, and now we are going to continue with part one, I would say, where we're presenting the general theory of the translation company. So, if you'd like to join me, then please, let's read together. And you see here I have my fancy-pantsy iPad here. The book is available in ebook format and PDF format. It is available on Amazon, all major online retailers. If you are a Nimsy client and you don't have a copy for some reason, please reach out to us. Make sure to get you a copy so that you can follow along here. So here we go. Presenting the general theory of the translation company. Surely you've heard the name Keynes, right? John Maynard Keynes was the most influential economist of modern times, so you've probably at least been exposed to the name before. When you hear somebody talking about Keynesian economics at a party, you may not know enough to join in the conversation, but you've heard of it, which means you know just enough to smile, nod, and then excuse yourself to find a more interesting conversation. Don't worry, we aren't going to focus too much on this subject. All you need to know to get our point here is that Keynes published his big claim to fame in 1936 under the title The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money, or TGTEIM, as nobody ever calls it, ever. Although people have started calling the general theory of the translation company TGOTTC, which, yeah, I have mixed emotions about that. I'm not sure how I feel about that. People haven't stopped talking about Keynes since. His theory defined the conversation in his field for the next century. It challenged the long-held classical economic theories of the time and sought to bring about a revolution in economic studies. Not everybody agreed with it, but everybody was talking about it. It forced the conversation away from the status quo and opened people's eyes to a whole new way of approaching a long-established discipline. And I think you can start to see here why Renato and I, when we wrote this book, why we drew inspiration from Keynes here in his title, because, like it says here, not everybody agreed with it, but everybody was talking about. I like to do things that people talk about. That doesn't mean that they have to be the correct things necessarily. It doesn't mean that they have to be perfect all of the time. It doesn't mean that they necessarily have to be the right things to get people talking about it. And it looks like that hasn't changed so much in 3 years. Let's go on, shall we? Alrighty. It is with unapologetic lack of both humility and self-awareness that we therefore would like to do the same for the language services industry, as Keynes did for the field of economics. We present to you the general theory of the translation company. Please hold your applause. We have a lot of ground to cover here. Our theory is not entirely new. However, there are some concepts that we present, some that we recycle, and some that are just plain borrowed from other sources. The general theory of the translation company was born as a sudden spark of inspiration for Renato years ago during a dinner conversation with a colleague wanting to better understand the industry. Renato took out a napkin and scribbled down the key components of the theory, which we identify in this book as market influencers, support activities, and core functions. Later, Renato would further formalize the theory while working at Common Sense Advisory by publishing his ideas for the whole industry to study. In the years since then, he continually worked on it. When Renato and Tucker teamed up to write this book, Tucker brought his own ideas and experience to the conversation, and the theory was refined further. But at the heart of it, the general theory is basically the same as when it was first written down on that cocktail napkin years ago. Concepts have been sharpened and the structure has changed a little, but the basic tenets have not changed. They have not needed to change because they withstood the test of time. The value of the general theory of the translation company isn't so much that it presents new information, but that it presents a look at the language services industry and our place in it. Perhaps this won't start a revolution, but it can pave the way for a more critical analysis of our industry, which is long overdue. We need to start a new discussion in the industry, and the general theory of the translation company provides the framework for such a discussion. In the sections that follow, we examine the language services industry and the three components of the general theory of the translation company, which are the market influencers, LSP support activities, and core functions. As we conclude our discussion on the market influencers, we take the next step to narrow the conversation and look at LSPs and how they operate within this ecosystem. In the subsequent section, we narrow our focus to the core functions of the LSP and how these work to add value to the language services value chain. First, though, let's start out with a high-level overview of the general theory of the translation company to provide some much-needed context. So you see here on the screen, you've got the general theory of the translation company, and it's these circles, these concentric circles that on the outer side you have the three market influencers, which are, well, we're going to get into it in the book here that we're reading. And then in the middle you have the 7 support activities, and then in that very center you have the 3 core functions of the LSP, and we're going to find out more about what that is. And for those of you following along at home, we are looking at figure 1, a visual depiction of the general theory of the translation company on page 10. Moving on to page 11. As you can see from figure 1, the general theory of the translation company is broken down into 3 separate components, starting at the outside of the model with the market influencers, then moving inward to support activities, and then core functions at the center. The flow from the outside towards the center is intentional. Successful LSPs always take this approach of starting with the market analysis and then using the information to set up the support activities that enable their core functions to add the maximum amount of value. Any other order of doing things is putting the cart before the horse. You also see here on the screen figure 2, the 3 components of the general theory and their roles. And we see here that the market influencers are the industry forces leading to risk and therefore to opportunity. You see the support activities, and the support activities create a framework to minimize risk and maximize opportunity to empower the core functions. And the core functions, last but not least, add value. 2 words, very simple. Evaluation of the market influencers reveals the forces that are leading to risk and opportunity. Evaluation of the market influencers reveals the forces that are leading to risk and opportunity. This is then used to define and set up support activities to minimize and maximize opportunity. Finally, the core functions are those activities that are carried out by the LSP to add value. If you are a project manager who is thinking of starting your own company, you can't just go out and project manage your way to fame and fortune. You need to slow down and make sure you are thinking strategically and set up an infrastructure that is going to allow you to scale your business. And it all starts with evaluating the market influencers. Likewise, if you do not set up and maintain the necessary support activities to support your core functions, you will find yourself struggling to deliver any value and will soon be out of business. Or you could be the owner and CEO of an already established LSP and are experiencing aggressive growth. Perhaps you are worried that your company may not be able to sustain that growth, and so you want to take the time to ensure that you are setting up teams for success. By using the principles in the general theory of the translation company, you evaluate the competitive landscape in which you are operating and put in place the strategy and structure of your LSP that it needs to continue sustainable growth. All right. So with that, we're getting into the introduction here, and for those of you that are following along, we started on page 8, and we've gone down to, to page 12 here, and we're at the section Introduction to the Market Influencers. So let's move on here. We've got time. Introduction to the market influencers. Market influencers are the 5 forces that shape and mold the language services industry. New entrants, substitutes, the bargaining power of customers and that of suppliers, and industry rivalry. By definition, the market influencers are largely outside of the control of any individual LSP. It is not our job to control or tame these market forces, but it is our job to observe and analyze them. We spend quite a bit of time on this topic in the book because it is critical to the success of the LSP. It is the first component of our theory, and it sets the stage for our discussions and conversations on support activities and core competencies. Studying and evaluating the market influencers is like reading the tide chart and checking the weather report before you set sail. You may be one of the best sailors in the world with the sturdiest boat ever built, but it is still important to make sure you know which way the current is flowing. The market influencer evaluation is largely an intellectual step. There are no decisions or actions required, just evaluation. Just like with any analysis, it is only useful to the extent that it allows you to make decisions and act. It gives you the information you need to start defining how your LSP is going to be structured, which will manifest in the setup and maintenance of the senior management and the support activities. All right, so now that we've taken a look at those market influencers, that's the outside of the circle here on the general theory of the translation company. So, we're going to move inward to the 7 support activities. And once again, this is live, so if the kids come up, then the more the merrier. Introduction to the support activities. In the context of the general theory, we define support activities as activities or functions that are carried out to enable your core functions to add value. We discuss the support activities after we finish our discussion of the market influencers. Because how you structure and carry out our support activities should be a direct result of your evaluation of the market influencers. Performing your own evaluation of the market and identifying your niche allows you to make strategic decisions about where and how to invest into support activities that will, in turn, strengthen your core functions. Support activities by themselves do not contribute to the language services value chain, except to the extent that they enable the core functions to add value. Basically, these are activities, processes, structures, facilities, and services that foster an environment where the core functions can add value. So, it may be tempting to downplay the importance of the support activities for an LSP, since we have already made it abundantly clear that they do not directly add value. Keep in mind, though, that the value-adding core functions cannot be carried out in a vacuum. They require a proper environment to exist. Support activities set up and maintain the environment to allow the core functions to be carried out. As an example, consider the project manager who does not have a working computer because there is no IT department, or the vendor manager who cannot recruit anybody because the vendors are not getting paid. How long can a salesperson properly do their job if there is no finance department to pay for client visits? To say that support activities do not add value is to say that they are not important, or is not to say that they are not important. Without these support activities, nothing happens. Support activities are not tied to any specific role. It is entirely possible for one person to be performing multiple support activities. For example, in a small LSP, the owner may take care of the accounting, human resources management, and other functions without any other help. In larger companies, there may be multiple departments for these same functions. Size is just one way in which LSPs differ. Of course, different companies may have different strategies or operate in different niches. Side note, I say niches. Some people say niches. Either is fine. I looked it up. I prefer niches. Oh, okay, sorry. No more side notes. Get out of here. Be gone, comment. We talk in detail about the 7 necessary support activities needed in an LSP. This list is not meant to be comprehensive, as each LSP is different, but will showcase some of the more prominent support activities that are common to most LSPs. And I forgot to go over this figure up here. We list out in the sections, if you're on page 13, the 7 LSP support activities are 1, management, 2, structure, 3, culture, 4, finance, 5, facilities and HR, and 6, technology, and 7, quality assurance. There's 7 of them. So those are the 7 support activities. I also forgot to read the market influencers. I might as well do that now. The 5 market influencers, which are the outside of the circle, are 1, new entrants, 2, substitutes, 3, the bargaining power of customers, 4, bargaining power of suppliers, and 5, competitive rivalry. So now that we've talked about the market influencers, we've talked about the 7 support activities of an LSP, let's talk about the core functions. And of course the core functions are my favorite because these are how language service providers add value to the language services value chain. If none of that makes sense, then that's fine. We're going to talk about all of this. This is just the introduction. Each one of these gets its own chapter. All right, introduction to the core functions. The 3 core functions are project management, vendor management, and sales. They are the meat and potatoes of the LSP. This is where value is added. If the support activities are what allow for the LSP to exist, then the core functions are what justify that existence. And project management is the most crucial function of the LSP. This isn't to say that other core functions or support activities are not important, but rather to emphasize that project management has the potential to most powerfully impact an LSP's ability to add value to the language services value chain. I should note that I lost you. I should note that I had a power off function. Sorry about that. I come from a project management background, and I wrote that, so do with it what you will. All right, got my camera back up and running. Now let's just take a moment to call out the elephant in the room here. We're talking about the core functions. You're probably wondering why the general theory classifies sales as a core function and not a support activity. How does sales add value to the customer? Isn't it all about making more money for the LSP? Or maybe you're thinking that quality assurance certainly adds value. Why isn't quality assurance one of the core functions? You may even be thinking that quality is the only thing that adds value. Shouldn't it be reclassified? Don't worry, there are very good reasons for all of these, and there are very good explanations to all of these questions and any other questions you may have. A more in-depth explanation on the subject is found in part 2 of this book, so you will have to be patient to learn more. Part 2 is a long ways away, guys. For now, we will resist the urge to disclose any spoilers. We don't want to ruin the ending for you. Before we talk about adding value, we need to look at the market as a whole. First things first. It is for this reason that this book is divided into 2 main sections. In part 1, we present the language services value chain and provide critical background information to help you perform your own market influencer evaluation. Define a niche and build a solid foundation for a competitive and profitable LSP. Part 2, we take a closer look at how LSPs set up their support activities and core functions to add value and to remain profitable. Remember that whether you are a translator, a project manager, or a CEO, you have a role to play in the language services value chain. The LSP's primary job is to add value. By understanding each and all of the 3 components of the general theory of the translation company, which are, say it with me now, market influencers, 7 support activities of the LSP, and 3 core functions. Remember that whether you are a translator, a project manager, or a CEO, you have a role to play in the language service value chain. The LSP's primary job is to add value. By understanding each and all of the 3 components of the general theory of the translation company, you will better understand the role that you play in accomplishing this goal. So sit up straight. Oh, I should sit up straight. Man, I slouch. I'm sorry. Bad posture. I'm a bad example. So sit up straight, pay attention, and let's get to work. And that does it. I guess that wasn't part 1. That was still the introduction. But that's a real good introduction of the general theory of the translation company, because now we're going to go into much more detail. So we're going to get into the nitty-gritty now. Part 1 starts with a look at the 5 market forces, which, as we mentioned in the book, are a direct inspiration from Michael Porter's 5 forces model, which was what he had published in the Harvard Business Review, and it's become widely adopted. It's been adapted and incorporated into the general theory of the translation company, because it works, because it fits. And the 5 forces model, it essentially allows us to get a snapshot of the industry. And if you're running a translation company, if you're thinking about starting a translation company, or investing into this industry, then it's a really good place to start, because it provides that overview in general of the industry, and really allows us to further refine our conversation as we get into the 7 support activities. So with that, I don't think we need to go any further today. My voice is starting to crack. So next time we are going to pick up where we left off here on, where are we? Part 1, laying the foundation. So if you are at home, page 19 is where we start next time, with a high look defining the language services industry. And with that, I will bid you good night, because I've still got a bunch of emails to catch up on, and the day is not over yet. So I wish you a wonderful night, and we'll see you next time when we pick up with the general theory of the translation